Detective Marcus Reed sat in his cruiser outside a suburban house, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel as the last rays of sunlight dipped behind the neatly trimmed hedges. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound in the still evening air. Marcus's gaze rested on the faded photograph taped to his dashboard, a group shot from his academy graduation. Everyone was younger, fresher, and unburdened by the weight of mistakes. Mistakes like the one that haunted him every night. It had been 6 years since Marcus's life changed irrevocably. A high-profile child abduction case had landed in his lap, and under pressure from the media, the mayor, and his superiors, he had arrested the wrong suspect. Camille Parker, a dedicated schoolteacher who had recently lost her niece to a custody battle. Evidence, circumstantial and shaky, had convinced Marcus she was hiding the child to keep her out of harm's way. The arrest made headlines. Camille was vilified, her life destroyed, until 2 years later when the real abductor, a distant family friend, was caught. By then, Camille's career and reputation were in tatters, and she had been irreparably scarred by the injustice. Marcus never forgave himself, no matter how often he replayed the investigation in his mind, wondering if he could have seen the truth earlier. And now, Marcus was staring down a new case with chilling similarities. The file on his passenger seat was neatly clipped and thick with reports. Jasmine Harper, age 7, had gone missing from her home 2 days earlier. Witnesses had reported seeing her godmother, Sandra Mills, with Jasmine near a park around the same time the girl disappeared. Sandra had a spotless record but had clashed with child services and the family court system after Jasmine's parents died in a car crash the previous year. Sandra had lost her bid for custody to Jasmine's uncle, a man with a history of neglect and financial instability. Now Sandra was missing, too. Marcus reached the modest apartment building where Sandra lived, his every instinct on high alert. He pushed the buzzer and waited. No answer. He pressed it again, longer this time. Still nothing. He exchanged a tense look with his partner, Officer Callie Torres, who nodded. "Let's do this." The lock yielded with a few swift motions, and the door creaked open into a scene of disarray. Children's toys were scattered across the floor, and a faint smell of reheated food lingered in the air. Everything spoke of hurried departure rather than malice. A home abandoned but not ransacked. Marcus's stomach tightened as he and Callie swept through the small apartment, methodically checking each room. Then he found her. Inside the master bedroom, Marcus opened a closet door and froze. Sitting in a nest of blankets, bound but unharmed, was Jasmine Harper. Her wide, tear-filled eyes met his, and she let out a choked sob of relief. Marcus immediately radioed for EMTs as Callie knelt beside the girl, speaking to her in soft, soothing tones. Relief coursed through Marcus, but it didn't last long. In the hallway, Callie called out, "Marcus, you're going to want to see this." Following her voice, he stepped into the small den, where she had unearthed a locked filing cabinet. The contents laid out on the desk told a heart-wrenching story. Journals, letters, court documents, all chronicling Sandra Mills's desperate attempts to gain custody of Jasmine. Every legal avenue had been exhausted, and every ruling had gone against her, favoring an uncle with no real attachment to the child. A photograph caught Marcus's eye. Jasmine beamed with joy at a park, perched on Sandra's lap. The love in Sandra's expression was unmistakable. Nearby was an open notebook, the final entry scrawled in Sandra's hand. "She deserves better than this broken system." Sandra Mills was found hours later, walking along a lonely highway. When Marcus and Callie brought her in, she offered no resistance. Tearfully, she explained that she had planned to take Jasmine far away, where the court's decisions wouldn't matter. "I've never laid a hand on her," she said through sobs. "I just wanted to protect her." Back at the precinct, Marcus sat across from Sandra in the dimly lit interrogation room. He didn't feel like a hero, despite having returned Jasmine to safety. He felt like a pawn in a cruel game where no one really won. "Do you know what happens now?" he asked her, his voice heavy with regret. Sandra nodded. "You'll send her back to him." And that's exactly what happened. Jasmine was returned to her uncle's custody the next morning, crying inconsolably as she was led away. Marcus turned in his final report and went home to his empty apartment, his badge sitting heavily on his kitchen counter. Days turned into weeks, and Marcus began seeking a way to reconcile his past mistakes. He found himself driving late into the night, his mind a swirl of unanswered questions and guilt. What if he had spoken up for Sandra? What if the system could change? 2 weeks later, unable to shake the weight of his latest case, Marcus made an unannounced visit to Camille Parker. She lived in a small townhouse now, far removed from the bustling life she once knew. When she opened the door, the sight of Marcus caused her to stiffen. "Detective Reed," she said, her tone icy. "Marcus," he corrected softly. "Please, I just wanted to talk." After a long pause, she stepped aside and let him in. They sat in silence for a while before Marcus spoke. "I need you to know how sorry I am, not just for what I did to you, but for how broken this system is. I'm leaving the force. It doesn't fix anything, but I can't keep doing this." Camille studied him with an unreadable expression. Finally, she said, "Justice isn't just about right and wrong. It's about doing better. What will you do now?" Marcus's voice cracked as he answered, I don't know, but I'll figure it out." As he left Camille's house, Marcus felt no redemption, only the resolve to try to be more than a cog in a flawed machine. He began attending meetings at local community centers, listening to the stories of families failed by the same system. He spent hours volunteering at shelters, helping children find safe places to live, and lending his voice to advocacy groups pushing for reform. His journey was slow, each step feeling as though he were trying to make amends to people he could never apologize to directly. On the one-year anniversary of Jasmine's return, Marcus visited her uncle's neighborhood. From a distance, he saw her playing in the front yard. She looked thinner, her laughter absent. Her eyes didn't light up the way they had in the photograph with Sandra. Marcus drove away before anyone noticed him, his chest tight with guilt. He vowed to fight harder, to speak louder, and to never let another Jasmine Harper slip through the cracks if he could help it. Months later, Marcus found himself in a courtroom, not as a witness or officer, but as an advocate. He had taken up the cause of a mother fighting to keep her child in a similar custody dispute. Though his new role wasn't without challenges, he felt a faint glimmer of hope when the judge took his words into consideration. Outside the courtroom, he ran into Sandra Mills, who had been released after serving a reduced sentence. They exchanged a long look before she spoke. "Why are you still doing this?" "Because someone has to," Marcus replied simply. Sandra hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe together we can make a difference," she said quietly. As they walked out into the sunlight, Marcus's steps felt a little lighter. He didn't know if he'd ever fully atone for his mistakes, but with each case, each voice he helped amplify, he found purpose. The weight on his shoulders didn't lift entirely, but it became something he could bear. He looked at the sky, determination flickering in his eyes. Maybe justice wasn't a straight path, but it was worth walking one step at a time.